Welcome to the 12 Days of Christmas devotional series. So today we are starting, this is a two-part on Jesus's lineage. And so specifically we're looking at the women in Jesus's lineage today. And then on the second half, which will go tomorrow, you'll see a little bit more about the other two women who are mentioned in Jesus' lineage. So today we're looking at Tamar. So if you want to read these, they're back in Matthew 1. So if you want to read the full list of Jesus' lineage, you can also look at worship from the 13th, in which I kind of want it's more of an overview. So today we're going to dig a little bit more into these pretty remarkable ladies. So first we're going to look at Tamar. And Tamar's story starts in Genesis 38. And so Tamar is an interesting story. She was married to a man named who was Judah's son. And scripture tells us that was seen as evil, and so God struck him down. Whether that was an illness, whether that was a snake bite, we're not sure. That's not given to us. But then the way that things worked in the first century specifically, or this is much earlier than that, was that Judean law allowed the next son to marry a wife, or to essentially help her get pregnant, to become her husband for long enough to give her a son, and that son would be seen as the husband who died's child, and would receive their portion of their inheritance. It was a way for a widow to still have a family and then to still be taken care of. So her son would become the heir to her dead husband's portion of the family wealth, or land for that matter. And so it would allow her to continue living and not just be sent off into prostitution or have some other issue. So Tamar is then married to Onan, who was unwilling to fulfill his marital duties. Scripture says he spilled his seed upon the ground. And so God got mad at that and struck Onan down. And then Judah had one more son, Shelah, who was very young. And so Tamar had to wait for him to grow up. But at this point, as Shelah was old enough to marry, Judah did not help that happen. He didn't make it happen. And so Tamar ends up having to trick Judah into giving her a son so that she can live out her days as a valued member of the family. And she does this. So Judah's wife dies, just to give that kind of in the midst of Shelah growing up. And so Tamar actually veils her face, and she acts like a prostitute, and she picks him up on the side of a road one day, and she ends up getting pregnant. But Judah did not have money to pay her, and so he gave her his signet ring and his staff, and said that if she brought that back to him later, that he would pay her. Well, months go by, and Tamar ends up being pregnant, and then Judah finds out that Tamar is pregnant, still remembering that he has no idea that it was her he slept with. And so then he basically says she needs to be punished for this, which the punishment for that would have been death. And so she says, she ends up showing him the signet ring and the staff and says, see, this is how I got pregnant. And so this is such an intriguing story. One, that there is so much messed up with the fact that this is how she has to get justice for her family, that Judah doesn't follow the law, he doesn't follow the restriction. And if these two men that she'd been married to hadn't been evil, they wouldn't have been killed by God in the first place. Now scripture tells us that that's not something we need to worry about day to day anymore. But there is this sense that this is one of the women in Jesus' lineage. And so we have, in the sense, this insistence that there are times when playing within the rules, or what is proper, is not, it doesn't work. And so there's this craftiness, this spirit of making something happen for the right reasons, in ways that might be seen as different or difficult or uncouth, that is a part of God's lineage, of Jesus's lineage. And I think what I love about this is that it speaks to the fact that sometimes the systems of the world are broken and people who need to get by can't. And so if they have to kind of sneak to get justice, it sounds like a part. See, the key is that it's for righteousness, right? Like, this is built into the law that people would care for women who couldn't own property. And so this was how that happened. And so what was happening, this wasn't just a matter of, Judah not liking his daughter-in-law. This was a matter of Tamar being able to live and to be, to have food and to have a household. And so this is one of the women. This is one of the women that Jesus claims in his lineage. So we're gonna scoot on a little bit ways down the road to, and that was from Genesis 38. If you want to look that up yourself. And so we're gonna jump ahead to Rahab, who is the next woman mentioned in Jesus' lineage. And Rahab's story is in Joshua 2, Joshua chapter 2. And so to kind of familiarize yourself with the timeline, the Israelites are set to conquer or to attack Jericho, and they send spies in ahead of time to find out what the situation is. And so and so there's these, so the spies head into Jericho. They end up visiting a prostitute named Rahab. We're just going to leave that there. And while they're there, they're found out. The king hears that the spies are in the city. They've gotten word of it, and so and Rahab finds out that the king is sent for the spies. And so Rahab goes to the spies and says, If you'll keep my family safe, I'll get you out of here safely. And so they agree, and they say that she needs to hang a red cord in their window, symbolizing the blood that was on the door frames and during Passover. And so this will let the people know, let the Israelites know when they attack and win back Jericho, that this house is one to be passed over. And so Rahab's business house is on the edge of the wall, and so she lets the spies out via a rope down the outside wall, sends them in the opposite direction that the king's men are going to go. Then she lies to the king's men, putting her whole family at risk, right? If she's found to lie to them, then they'll kill her, they'll execute her along with that. And so the king believes him, sends out his troops. It's the wily Israelites that end up getting away. And when they come back with the army, they conquer Jericho, and Rahab and her family are saved because of her willingness to choose God over the people of her own town. This is, once again, you get into these spaces as, why is this woman in Jesus' lineage? Well, she's kind of three different ways is she in an oppressed class. She's a Canaanite, so she's not Israelite. She's a woman, and which for the most part is property, and then she's a prostitute. And so she couldn't have less social power. She couldn't be lower in the caste system than she is. And to me, this passage in Jesus, that Rahab is in Jesus' lineage, speaks to the fact that the lowest of the low are people that Jesus cares about. It speaks to the fact that doing what is right, even when things are really, really hard or really risky, for God, can make a huge impact on the world. And so each of these women are remarkable in their own right. When you put them together and see that this is a part of how Jesus claims his lineage in Matthew, it's remarkable to see. And so I would invite you to take some time and think about think about some things like justice. Think about what is good and what does God want from us. And when we think about the poor and the lost and the broken, how might we think about being the people of God and helping out people in need so they didn't need to take some of these more drastic measures? How can we be the righteous people of God, even when faced with stuff that might seem a little improper? Because that's the thing about when you really get into the Old Testament, there's a lot of, quote, improper conversations, a lot of improper situations, because life is filled with messy reality. And so when we're really getting into the Old Testament, you can dig in and see that it was not just this pleasant kids book worth of events, that they're pretty real and pretty murky stuff. So I hope you'll join us tomorrow as we look into two more amazing women in Jesus' lineage, Bathsheba and Anyway, I will have those tomorrow. So you have a wonderful day, and God bless.